Hi guys, I'm here today with a really fun challenge for you for International Scrapbook Day, and that challenge is using up your scraps. Now this challenge is part of the fun that is happening over on Paige Evans' Happy Scrappy Place Facebook group. So if you aren't part of that group, I will leave the link down below and make sure you head on over, especially today because there are 13 challenges and 13 giveaways and 14 free cut files. There's just so much going on for International Scrapbook Day, so do make sure you head over there and join in the fun. Now, my challenge for you is to use up your scraps, and so as you've seen here, I'm going to do a little page in my traveler's notebook, and the first thing I've done here is I just cut out a wee scrap piece of paper. It's just slightly smaller than my traveler's notebook page. I'm going to trim that down later, but I just need something to stick all these little scraps onto. So as you can see here, I've got three little plastic envelopes, and what I do is I keep my scraps for each collection in a little separate envelope. It keeps everything together, it keeps everything flat, and I know exactly where all my scraps are. So what I'm doing is pulling out scraps from three different pink paisley collections here. I've got Pick Me Up, Whimsical, and Horizon, and I'm just I'm border punching a million little scraps of paper. I'm not worrying too much about what colors or patterns they are. I'm hoping that I'm going to end up with enough. So the trick is for this is to maybe punch more than you think you're going to need. It's easier to have too many than it is to have not enough at the end. You'll see exactly what I mean very soon. But I'm just using the same border punch for each of these little scraps. And you could do it with a different border punch, but I really only have the one. So that's what I'm using here. I don't tend to throw away really any of my scraps, and for good reason, because you can so use them for all sorts of different things, creating your own little embellishments or like 3x4 filler cards for Project Life or things like that, Happy Mail, and this is just another opportunity to use those little scraps. So any of these punched pieces that I'm doing, I just want to make sure that they're the width, at least the width of that background paper that I cut there, and they don't need to be super wide, so any of these wide ones I am trimming down. That one I got lucky, I had already punched it for another layout, so that was one less punched piece I had to do. I'm just about coming to the end here. As you can see, I did speed this up considerably for you because it did take a little while, but it's a great way of using up all these little pieces that otherwise just don't get used and sit in your stash, or worse, go into the bin. So I've got my pile of punched pieces here, and I'm just going to separate them out roughly by color because, of course, I'm going to create a rainbow with these scraps. So just to make life easier for myself, I am going to just put them into roughly color piles. There are a couple in here that I had punched out of those branding strip bits at the end of your 12x12 papers, and they did end up being slightly too short for what I had intended for this page, so I put those away and I will use them for something else. Now I'm starting at the bottom because I'm going to layer these pieces from the bottom up. So the bottom one, I made sure that that punched piece was hanging off the bottom of the white paper background, and the top piece I'll end up trimming off later. So I'm starting with my very darkest blues at the bottom, and I'm going to build my rainbow all the way up. This is rather adhesive intensive. I went through, I think, well, they were like half tape runners, but I ended up using 3 tape runners for this layout. 2 of them I ended up finishing off, and then I ended up having to get a 3rd one, which was super annoying. I got my scraps here, so I've started with the navy blues, the lighter blues, and I'm going to go through teals here. I didn't do a whole bunch of like planning on whether this was going to fit, so that's why I said it does pay to have more scraps than you think you're going to need, because or you could do a bit more planning than I do and measure it all out. But what I didn't do was have any greens in here. And so the transition from that teal to yellow was a little bit stark for my liking. So I went and found a piece that is still a scrap, but it was a bigger scrap. I did have to cut into it so that I could get this more greeny green, which just helps that transition from the teal to the yellow. See, that one there was a little bit wide. The wider they are, the bulkier this piece will end up being. So I want the width to be wide enough to cover up the one underneath it, but not so wide that you end up going underneath too, if that makes sense, because this is already going to end up being a fairly bulky piece that goes into your notebook. If you were doing this for a scrapbook layout, it would be another brilliant way of adding a bit of texture and color to a layout. So definitely don't feel like you have to do this in a traveler's notebook. It would also make a really beautiful filler card for a project life as well. So now I'm getting towards the end of my background piece here, and I was starting to get a tiny bit concerned about whether I had enough pieces, and I sort of laid them out to make sure that I did. I did end up adding in that really dark red piece, and it just breaks up. It was a little bit sort of too peachy and light pink in there, so I did add in that darker red. It does kind of stick out in the rainbow, but I sort of like the contrast that it gives between the colors. So then once you've laid out all your pieces and stuck them down, you can just flip that piece over and trim off all the bits on the edge. Now I will admit, you could probably keep all these little scrappy pieces if you want to, but they did go into the bin for me. Now, because I overhung the piece at the bottom, I just need to trim a tiny bit off the top there to make sure it will fit on my notebook page. And I was going to just go ahead and use the tape runner to stick this into my notebook, and I decided to use some red line tape instead, just to make sure that this stays well stuck to the page, because like I said, it is quite bulky and quite stiff as well. So I need it to bend around the edge of my notebook, because this is more towards the back of my notebook, so I do have that little bend in the spine there. So I'm just laying that on. Having the border around the edge of it just means that when you're turning pages, you're not going to catch any of those little punched edges as well. Now, as I was going through my scraps, I did pull out a few pattern papers that caught my eye that I want to use to back my photos. It's a photo collage. Was trying to take a headshot, and I can't help but be a tiny bit silly when I'm taking those sorts of photos. It's just very hard to take yourself seriously, so there are quite a few outtakes, I will say. And I'm not layering too much because, again, I don't want to add a super amount of bulk to this page. I've just added, I think there's 4 little scraps under there, just a variety of colors, and I did end up adding that darker green just to really ground it. It gives it a little bit of an outline, which I think looks really good. Now, one of the scraps that I had in here was this branding strip, and I think it's from Horizon. No, I think it might be Whimsical. I actually don't know at this point, sorry. And I wanted to use some of these little sentiments because they were really cute. I wasn't sure where I was going to put them, but after I was finished, I thought they looked really nice just tucked under some of those little flaps there. It does cover up some of the hard work that you've already done, but it adds almost like, I'm not going to embellish this page a lot, but it just adds that tiny little bit of embellishment. Plus, I always love these sort of positive sentiments as part of a page. Now, I do want to add a title to this page. I'm not going to add any journaling, but I want to make a fairly big statement title here. So I have picked out all of my pink paisley alpha stickers here, and I'm going to try to spell out be the rainbow you wish to see. So I'm going to have to be a little bit careful about which alphas I use where, because this is only a traveler's notebook page, so these larger alphas, it is harder to make a sentiment with them. So of course I'm going to have to use these little rainbow foam thickers for my word rainbow, and I'm just trying to pick out rainbow colors, as you can see, as well as paper scraps. Some of these alphas are a little bit scrappy themselves, having used up most of the useful letters, so I only have a few left, but I was happy with how the rainbow turned out. It's definitely brighter in real life. You'll see in the photos at the end. I was definitely not going to be able to fit as with those larger alphas, so I went and pulled out again my Pick Me Up stamps, and I'm just going to stamp those, and I decided to do black even though the rest of the page is quite rainbowy. I didn't want to add any more colors, and I quite liked the contrast that the black gives it. It stops the page being a little bit too wishy-washy, I think. So here's where I made a tiny mistake, because I've put Be the Rainbow You, and I should have put Wish first because I'm definitely not going to have enough room. So I didn't want to offset the alphas. Instead, what I did was just trimmed off a tiny bit of the eye, just that tiny bit at the top, so that I can fit the whole word Wish across there, and it just looks like the W's kind of overlapping the eye a little bit, but it actually isn't overlapping because I definitely could not have that bulk in here. I don't want to stamp the word To directly underneath you, so I'm using the horizon alphas there to spell out To, and I will stamp the word C at the end, but because I've used two different alphas, I really wanted to use the third, so I pulled off the first word, B, and replaced that with some of the whimsical alphas there, and then I can stamp the word C, and I'm going to throw an exclamation mark under that and call this page done. Like I said, this page is all about using up those scrappy little pieces of paper that, I don't know about you, but I definitely cannot bear to throw away. That's why I have envelopes full of them everywhere. So pull out your scraps and make something with them. Head over to the Happy Scrappy Facebook page and enter to win a fabulous Scrappy prize. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Leave me any comments or questions you've got down below, and if you want to keep watching, there's a couple more videos on screen. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye guys.